Hi everyone, this is Mr. Castro speaking and I'm recording this video for my English 11 students at San Ysidro High. So for all my English 11 students, as a reminder, your homework over spring break is to read chapters 15 and 16 of The Radius of Us. After you read these next two chapters, please make sure that you catch up on any missing work that you might have for my class, including the problem solution essay. And if you guys have any questions or concerns during spring break, feel free to send me an email or a Remind 101 message anytime. Hope you guys all have a great spring break. Take care. Chapter 15, Gretchen. Okay, so all things considered, I'd say I'm handling the situation fairly well. When I decided to do this nice thing for Phoenix last night, because of how great he's been all week with the kids, I made myself believe it was simple. A little drive to the country. You can handle that, Gretchen. I hadn't factored in the homing device. But after I talked to Sally, I let Phoenix back in the car, which is making me feel seriously proud and almost normal. Maybe a little self-absorbed since the other night I didn't even think to ask Phoenix why he was living with Sally and Amanda and trying to get permission to stay, but otherwise fairly normal. We are sitting in a parking lot of a Quick Trip and I'm sipping an enormous mango iced tea. We're killing time waiting for his parole officer to call him back to see if he can come with me to get pupusas. I hadn't factored in his parole officer either. Oh my god, Phoenix has a parole officer. Just thinking about that sends my heart racing. But then I forced myself to remember what Sally told me. Honestly, how do you have a parole officer when all you did was bring your little brother to the US because it's not safe where you live? Sally said that Phoenix and his brother fled El Salvador because their neighborhood was dangerous and because there were people there who wanted them dead. That if they stayed, they almost certainly would have been killed. And how does that even happen anyway? How do a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old who aren't criminals, she promised me again and again that they aren't criminals, end up with death threats? So now here we are in a parking lot waiting for permission to go to the Lonega, which is a little mountain town where there are supposed to be to die for pupusas. I'm feeling bad because I assumed Phoenix did something really terrible, and I think he's feeling bad because he completely freaked me out with the ankle monitor. Want some Skittles? He asks, pushing the red package toward me. Sure, I tell him. I've never really understood Skittles. I mean, if you're going to eat sweets, why choose sweets that don't contain any chocolate? But I guess I want him to know I'll take whatever he offers me, maybe because I feel sorry for him. God, I feel sorry for him. Do you get to talk to your brother? I ask. Not really, he says, putting the bag of Skittles on the dash. Amanda and Sally bought him a phone card, but it's really expensive to call from over there, and I guess he doesn't get access to the phone. Over there. Sally told me his brother is in Texas, in a special detention facility for children who were caught at the border without their parents. But she also told me that Phoenix and his brother weren't really caught. They swam across the river and walked right up to a border patrol officer to ask for protection. That's not exactly true, Phoenix says quietly. What? I ask, lost in my thoughts. About Ari, my brother. I haven't talked to him because, uh, he doesn't talk. Oh, I say. You mean he has, like, a mental disability? No, he shrugs. It's not like that. Then he looks right at me, his eyes filling up with pain, or maybe regret. The psychologist over there, she says it's temporary. It's just from the trauma. Trauma? My heart starts to thump in my chest. Again. But this time it's not because I'm afraid, or I'm not afraid for myself, at least. I think maybe I don't want to know these things about Phoenix. But also, I do. I want so much to know him. It was really hard, he says, coming to Mexico. A bunch of bad stuff happened to us. But, I mean, we made it. He shifts in his seat and puts his feet against the dashboard. We were so relieved when we finally got to the US side of the border. But then they took us and put us in this room, like a holding cell. Everyone calls it the heladera, the freezer. It was so cold. and my little brother, he was like shivering. Phoenix folds his arm across his chest, as if it is cold now, as if this car is a freezer. We were still really wet from the river. His lips were like turning blue, and I was holding him, trying to warm him up a little. He hugs himself tighter and looks over at me. You don't need to hear all this shit. I do, Phoenix. I touch one of his arms and gently unfold it. Tell me. It feels good holding on to his arm. Like if I can just keep holding on, this might all make more sense. We were there for a really long time, like hours and hours. Then the guard came back. He told me I had to leave, but my brother was staying there. He told he folds his free hand behind his head and looks up at the roof of the car. Ari didn't understand what was going on. They pulled him off me, not rough or anything, and then they put me in handcuffs. Your brother saw this? He's leaning back, looking up at the roof, or maybe through it. Maybe he's imagining the wide open sky. Yeah, and I kept telling him everything would be okay and we would talk soon. I tried to explain that he didn't need to worry, that they were going to protect him, and the car is completely silent because Phoenix stopped talking and because I can't speak. What can I possibly say? Phoenix turns toward me, his eyes, Gretchen, the way he looked at me. I study Phoenix, feeling his hurt in my own body, real physical pain, stabbing into my gut. I'm so sorry, I whisper. That's all I can come up with. Ari didn't say anything when they took me out of there. He curled up, like into a little ball, and he watched while they pulled me out of that heladera. But he didn't really have to say anything because I guess I knew. Knew what? I don't know how to explain it. I think I knew he was kind of like dying inside. Does that make sense? No, not a single word of it. I can't believe they separated you, I whisper. Yeah, he looks away, toward the highway. How could they do that? At least he's safe, he says, but he still won't talk to anyone, not even me. He grabs a bag of Skittles from the dash and pours them into his hand. Or maybe especially not me. I think he hates me for bringing him here. He studies the Skittles and then he begins to separate them out slowly. Green on one side, red on the other. He doesn't hate you. Neither of us says anything for a long time. I don't know, he says finally. He sends me letters at least. Well, pictures. Like, for magazines? No, he draws them. They're really good. He pops a candy into his mouth and pulls a wallet from his back pocket. He takes out a piece of paper that's been folded into it and hands it to me. This one's of our hammock, the one outside our grandmother's house. The hammock is hanging between two fruit trees, with mountains in the background. It's got little flowers underneath, butterflies, even a caterpillar. It looks just like the place, which makes me wonder about my little brother. He was only 7 the last time he saw that hammock. It's really good. I hand it back to Phoenix. I'm trying to imagine him there, swinging in a hammock. It's not easy to picture. That landscape seems so far away from where we are right now, at a random exit off the interstate. Ari doesn't hate you, I say again. Phoenix puts the drawing back into his wallet and reaches for the last of the Skittles. Will he be able to come and live with you? I don't think so. He takes a piece of candy between his thumb and forefinger and examines it. But he'll probably get to stay here, which is really good. Why not with you? It's different for me. He looks over at me. I'm an adult. He smiles a big, innocent grin. At least, they think I'm an adult. I'm not so sure. Yeah, I'm an adult too. Technically, I say. What does that even mean? To be an adult? He asks. I have no idea. But I guess what it means for me is that my chances of staying here are pretty bad. I'll know for sure in a couple of weeks. He's not staying here. Those words have a strange effect on me, like they punched a tiny little hole in my chest. I squeeze my eyes shut, trying not to overthink my reaction to the thought of him leaving. I barely know him, after all. What happens in a couple of weeks? I go back to court. Until then, I'm free to do whatever I want, as long as I stay within 20 miles of Amanda and Sally's house. Wow, what freedom. He stretches his hand out to offer me the last Skittle. It's green. I'm not complaining. You should see where I was before I got this thing, he says, just, just gesturing toward the tracking device beneath his jeans. You'd never know he was wearing it unless you knew. For better or worse, I know. That's not the sort of thing you forget. What was it like, I ask? I mean, in detention. A strange emotion flashes across his face, one I can't read. Then he turns to look at me again. He really looks. It's like he actually sees me. His eyes have a little crinkle around the edges, like they're smiling. And then his face actually breaks into a real smile that makes my stomach do a flip. Let's just say I'd rather be sharing these Skittles with you than sharing a tiny room with 60 men dressed in blue jumpsuits. 60 men? They put 60 people in the same room? The whole flipping stomach thing is still happening, which makes me feel a little more awake or something, and also a little scared and confused. Yeah, he nods. And there was no privacy. You couldn't even shower or, well, I mean, we had to do everything out in the wide open. I look at Phoenix, and my mind starts to conjure the image of him standing under a hot stream of shower water. I let it, even though I know I shouldn't, since I have a devoted boyfriend, and since Phoenix is telling me all these terrible, sad things. But it feels so good to have that thudding pulse spread from the pit of my stomach to feel anything that isn't fear or anxiety or the dull, hazy distance of life going on around me without me. Sitting here with Phoenix sharing candy I don't even like, imagining what water would look like running through his hair, across his face, down his back and chest. God, it feels like living. I'm pretty sure he feels it too. Phoenix's phone rings. It's my pro officer, he says. Give me a minute. Phoenix steps out of the car and starts to talk. I sit there, still wondering how a boy like Phoenix can end up with a parole officer. Phoenix laughs, which is not really what I expect from his conversation with a law enforcement official. Then he leans through the window of the car and covers the receiver with his hand. Officer Wart needs to know where you plan to take me. Talonega, I say. No, he needs details. It's a surprise. He doesn't do surprises. Ugh, I say, trying to sound dramatic. There's a lady in Dahlonega who makes homemade pupusas every Saturday morning. She sells them outside her church. And she makes that kind with the little flowers. I checked. Phoenix leans in closer, an adorable smile spreading across his whole face. Seeing that smile, it makes me breathe a little easier. You're taking me to another city for homemade pupusas de la Roca? Yeah, I tell him, as long as Officer Wart gives us permission. And I think we need to hurry because she quit selling them at noon. That's so amazing, he says. I can't believe you're doing that for me. I hear the officer's voice coming through the phone speaker. Pupusas? Phoenix speaks into the phone. They're food from El Salvador, like tortillas, sort of, stuffed with meat and cheese and stuff. He listens again. What's the address? Phoenix asks me. Of the church. I show him my phone where the address is programmed into the map. He reads it aloud. 93 Main Street. It's called St. Matthew the Apostle. After a moment of listening, Phoenix says, I understand. And then, I can do that. And then he laughs and says, yeah, sure, Officer Ward, I'll bring you one. But they're only really good when they're fresh. Phoenix looks over and gives me a thumbs up. So Officer Ward is going to let us go on this little adventure. Phoenix turns his back to me and I let myself study him. The curve of his neck, that place where his hairline ends. I let myself notice the way it feels to study his angles. The parole officer must be saying something funny again because Phoenix laughs nervously and shakes his head. Dude, we're going to a church. Then more nervous laughter. We're just friends, he says quietly. Then he listens some more and begins to nod. That sounds great. Thanks. He shoves the phone into his pocket and gets back into the car. Did you hear that? The last part? His cheeks are flushed and the tips of his ears have turned red. I can't really imagine what Officer Ward would say to cause Phoenix such embarrassment. Or maybe I can. Your parole officer thinks we are, like, on a date? Yeah, well, not exactly. What did he say? I ask. He shakes his head. Doesn't matter. Come on, I shove him, teasing. Tell me. He looks over at me and runs his hand over his short hair. He told me not to let you take me to some cheap motel, that he knows exactly where I am at all times. I'm pretty sure I start to blush too. Well, I can handle this. Bummer, I say, nudging his knee again. I guess that ruins part two of my surprise. He shakes his head, but he doesn't move my hand from his knees. Drive, he says, looking at the clock on the dash. We've got 48 minutes until those pupusas disappear, and you'll lose your chance to try the best food ever invented. And then I had this thought that even if he might be leaving soon, Felix will need to be part of my life for now, like every day. Because I know he's running away from something so terrible, I can't imagine it, but when he's with me, we both are here. Right here. Chapter 16, Phoenix. I'm eating my third pupusa de la Rocco. The cortido is perfect, and the pupusas are damn near perfect, and this crazy beautiful girl is next to me, so close that, even though we're not touching, I feel the warmth from her body, and she keeps closing her eyes, leaning her head back a little, and releasing these small, soft moans. I guess she likes pupusas. Oh my god, she says. What is this stuff called again? Chicharron. Okay, she tells me, chicharron is my new best friend. I watch her take another bite of pupusa and then slowly wipe the cortido juice from her lip. And this slaw stuff? What do you call it? Cortido. Is there more? I look into the white plastic bag that the nice abuelita gave me. There's a ton, I say. Enough for like a week of binge eating pupusas. Gretchen smiles big. Let's do it. Let's sit here until next Sunday and stuff our faces with pupusas. We both know that's not going to happen, but it's amazing to hear her say that she wants it. I still can't figure it all out. Why she's spending her time with me, why she's doing this great thing for me. And also, if I'm being real, why we're sitting so close to each other, so much energy tugging at the space between us when she's got a college boyfriend somewhere who takes her out for dinner and drives his own car. We can be friends, I mean, that's fine. But what it feels like to sit this close to her isn't really a friendly kind of feeling. Gretchen sped all the way up here on narrow, curving roads that cut through the forest. When the trees cleared, we were in this town surrounded by mountains, and the church was right in front of us. I didn't know Georgia had mountains. I guess this shouldn't surprise me. Until a few weeks ago, I couldn't even find Georgia on the map. And now here I am, sitting alone with her on the stairs of this pretty white church in a little mountain town. I've never seen a church like this, except maybe in the movies. It's wood, painted a pure bright white. All the windows are filled with colored glass. And when the light comes through that glass, it changes entirely, making long, shifting patterns on the floor. There's a tall tower in the front and a little porch with white columns. That's where we're sitting now on the concrete stairs. We're looking out across the street of a town with shops all lined up in rows. And behind the shops are mountains, their angles soft and gentle. The trees have these tiny new leaves on them, so they're not quite green. They almost look yellow when the sun filters through them. Or gold, maybe. They're so thin and translucent that they look fragile, like they might break if they fall to the ground before the summer heat toughens them. When we pulled up, we saw a table propped beside a big comal. A bunch of mismatched plates sat piled on top of the table next to a white plastic bucket. It reminded me so much of my abuela's pupusas stand back in Lopango that it hurt to look at it. Even the flowered tablecloth looked familiar, like my grandmother might have just pulled it from under the sink in her courtyard to spread it on that table herself. But there was no one at the table, and there weren't any pupusas there either. We missed them, Gretchen said, pulling into a spot in front of the church. I looked over at her, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. Her face was twisted into a sad grimace, so I wanted to say something that would let her know it was okay, that just being here with her was enough. Don't worry, I told her. It's not a big deal. Maybe we can come back. We both knew that wasn't likely. Officer Ward made clear that this was a one-time only thing. He told me that if I decided to leave the state of Georgia with Gretchen, or if we weren't back inside my 20-mile radius by 6, he would send the cops to chase us down. Gretchen wasn't ready to give up on the pupusas yet, so she made me go inside the church with her to see if we could find someone to ask. We walked to the front of the church, through big wooden doors that creaked and squealed on their hinges. Pushing on those heavy doors, Gretchen almost plowed right into an old lady in a house dress. Turns out that old lady was Mama Lola, the sweetest abuelita who sells pupusas here every Saturday morning to raise money for the church. Gretchen launched right in. She told Mama Lola that we came all the way from Atlanta because she read about the pupusa stand on some food blog. Mama Lola squinted in confusion and repeated the word blog a couple of times, rolling the word around in her mouth like she was trying to get the flavor of it. En la computadora, I told her. because at first I thought maybe she didn't speak English, but she spoke plenty of English. Once Gretchen figured that out, she decided to go on and tell the lady my entire story, all the way down to how I'm separated from my brother. I'm not sure how much of it Mama Lola understood. Gretchen was talking really fast. But the abuelita must have gotten most of it because she took us out to our son-in-law's truck, opened the back, and loaded about 30 pupusas into a plastic bag, complete with little containers of red salsa and a bunch of plastic baggies filled with cortido. Gretchen tried to pay her, but she refused, saying the pupusas were a regalo, a gift. Then Gretchen gave Mama Lola a huge hug, which I think sort of shocked her. I went with a more subtle approach, shaking her hand and saying, Gracias, señora. Muy amable. Then Mama Lola's son-in-law drove her away in his truck down that country road. So here we are, Gretchen and Phoenix, alone on the steps of an empty white church, stuffing our faces with pupusas, looking out at mountains that seem to go on forever. The sky is blue, the trees are bright yellow gold, and the sun is shining, like it's trying really hard to produce some heat for us. I push up my sleeves and let the sun warm my skin. I'm so completely full, Gretchen says. When I look at her, she's closing her eyes and leaning back on her elbows. She's wearing another one of those enormous sweaters with a huge wide neck and it slides down her shoulder. Her eyes are still closed, so I let myself look at the thin black strap of her undershirt and the pale skin of her shoulder. Her skin is so light that the sun seems to shine right through it. I can't look away. I catch the scent of the cortido and I feel tired suddenly. That smell, vinegar mixed with cabbage and the earthy aroma of the masa, it makes it takes me right back to my abuela's pupusa stand down by the lake. It's like I'm standing behind the comal with her, a scrawny kid who wishes he were out climbing rocks with his friends, but he's helping his abuela instead because he hasn't got any choice in the matter. I was the one who scooped the cortido out of the bucket. Every Saturday, abuela made me go down to the commercial district by the lake with her to help. I put on clear plastic gloves that made my hands sweaty, and I grabbed handfuls of the stuff and dumped it onto the pupusas after she served them on plates. I used to stand there with her for hours, hating the stench of vinegar and the feel of the gloves on my hands, looking out to the mountains and the lake, thinking about all the adventures I wished I could be on with my friends. I should have let her teach me how to make these things, I say quietly. Who? My grandmother. She tried to teach me. You should get a recipe from her. I'll help you make them. My head is starting to spin. She's not around anymore, I hear myself say. She died? Yeah, a while back. How? Gretchen asks. It's an innocent question, but I can feel my whole body starting to shake. I don't think I can answer. I guess I'm looking pretty bad because Gretchen reaches out and puts her hand on my knee. It feels good there, warm, even through my jeans. I brush my finger lightly against hers and let myself notice how touching her, even like this, makes the blood pump faster through my veins. It's okay, she says, squeezing my knee. We don't have to talk about it. I look over at her, watching me, and I decide to talk. I can't tell her everything, but I want her to know something. A few years ago there were floods in my town. There was like a current, a river of mud. I close my eyes. I'm whispering. I don't really know how to explain it. That's the truth. How could I possibly begin to explain it? A landslide, Gretchen nods. I'm sorry, Phoenix. She leans into me, and suddenly I don't care if Gretchen has a boyfriend. Maybe she doesn't care either. Maybe it's fine for me to want this, to want to feel her body pressed against mine. I want to sit like this for a long, long time, to study Gretchen's soft hand on my leg, to know every detail of it. Because I don't want to see any of the images that are taking shape in my head. I don't want to see my abuela's gnarled old hand showing me cómo se golpea la masa con la palma de la mano. My grandmother showed me so many times how to pound the masa into discs, into just the right thickness for the filling to go inside. Her palm open, her wrist moving quickly up and down. I never could do it right. Con la práctica, she told me, still working the dough. Con la práctica se logra perfeccionar la técnica. We would stand in my abuela's courtyard pounding that dough, and she would tell me how proud she was of me, a boy not afraid to make pupusas. She said there was no reason for this to be women's work, that I could do it too. She said all I needed was practice. If only she had known that I didn't care a thing about making pupusas. I wanted to leave that courtyard and head for the hills. Well, I was a good boy back then, so I stood beside her and pounded the dough, until the gangueros started showing up at my abuela's courtyard gate, until they demanded money, telling us that she would need to pay if she wanted to keep her pupusa stand, until those assholes grabbed me by the feet, held me out of a window 3 stories above the street, every day for weeks, until my grandmother and her courtyard disappeared, carried on powerful waves of mud into the lake below, until I abandoned her. The corners of my eyes start to sting. I push myself up to stand and I gather up the last of the used napkins and containers. I'm gonna go find a place to throw the stuff away, I say, still looking away from her. I take my time walking around the perimeter of the church, trying to pull my shit together. I tell myself to stop thinking about the past. I tell myself to think about the blue sky and the warm sun and the fact that I'm hanging out with a beautiful, kind girl who brought me to the countryside to buy me pupusas. I find a garbage can around back and drop our bag of trash inside. I'm worried that maybe I've been gone for too long, that Gretchen will wonder what happened or come looking for me. While running round the corner to the front of the church, Gretchen is still there on the steps, exactly as I left her, waiting for me. Except she has her phone out and she's texting. Ready? I ask her. Mm-hmm, she mumbles, standing up. She looks at her phone and back at me a couple of times, like she's trying to figure something out. You've got to get back to Atlanta, right? She says. Yeah, unless you want for our next adventure to be getting chased down by the Dahlonega police. Could be fun, she shrugs. A low-speed chase through the mountains? Not my kind of fun, I say. I know she wants to lighten the mood, so I'm trying to play along. Want to meet up with some friends of mine downtown? I hear the anxiety in her voice. I don't know if it's because she's nervous about introducing me to her friends, or because she doesn't feel comfortable going downtown. I've seen enough to know that Gretchen doesn't like being in crowded places. Do you want to go? I ask. She nods. Yeah, I think I do, but it might be stupid. She starts walking toward the car. It's my best friend Bree and her new boyfriend. They want to do like a tourist night. Go downtown and pretend we're from out of town, do all the stupid touristy stuff. Then she smiles in a way that would make it really damn hard to say no. The truth is, even without that smile, I don't want to stay with Gretchen to end. Let's do it, I tell her.